They sent in a tank battalion and an infantry division in order to get him out. They sent in 20 dentists because they didn't know which of the bodies in the graveyard. They saluted and they thanked God.
Has there ever been a country that would go out of their way like this to retrieve what's left of one body of one person like this? Shalom, everybody. Olivier here with Shalom and Messiah. And it's been long overdue. I have two guests today. We're going to do our 3 Jews, 5 Opinions program. And maybe you'll get lucky. You'll get 6 opinions today. We don't know. But as always, thank you for watching the program. Please subscribe. Make sure you follow us on Telegram, on Instagram, on X, on Facebook, and YouTube, all those different places, either Olivier Melnick or Shalom and Messiah. You can also, as you see on your screen, you can donate to a ministry. It really helps us continue the work and bless Israel and currently bless the IDF with many different needs. So thank you for that. It really makes a difference. We could not do all of what we're doing without you watching and supporting us financially. So let me introduce my guest. I have David Tal. David, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
And I have Rob Schwartz.
Good to see you guys.
Good to see you guys. It's been too long. It's been over a month, I think, since we last did 3 Jews, 5 Opinions. So, with the inflation, the way it's going, maybe it's 3 Jews, 6 Opinions. I don't know. We'll see. But I wanted to, we always have, we don't take ourselves seriously, but we always discuss serious matters, and it's usually dark or negative, but I wanted to start with something that was actually a little more positive. A few weeks ago, the last hostage, the body of the last hostage was brought back to Israel, and I believe there's already been a service, a burial and a service, and maybe David, you know some about that. But so what's going on now? The last hostage has been brought back. To me, it was interesting that it was within 24 hours of the premature launching of phase 2 of the peace plan, which I don't think is going to work, but that's my opinion. So let's talk about this whole thing. David, and then, Rob, jump in anytime you want, of course. But David, we got the last hostage. So, I took my little yellow ribbon off. I was really excited about that. And I still have it on my shelf, but I don't wear it anymore. On my shelf, it's a reminder of how fragile, we all are. Because, any of that could happen again. Lord willing, it won't. But what do you have to say about the last hostage and the situation in Gaza and the timing?
Well, I think I've said this before, but this kind of indicates the situation we're in. Israel went from trauma to post-trauma at this point. The fighting part of the war ended at that point. We could not continue on. We could not move on to anything. Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, world peace and whatever you want without that having been done. That is so deeply in us. So the whole country, I don't think we celebrated. This is like, whew, that part is done. And I think what would probably connect to most of the people that when they sent in 2,500 people to get him out. I mean, it was, they sent in a tank battalion and an infantry division in order to get him out. They sent in 20 dentists because they didn't know which of the bodies in the graveyard. We got information about what graveyard, but it was unmarked graves. So they exhumed something like 380 bodies, and they checked something like 230 in order to uncover the specific one. So there were 20 dentists in military uniforms going from one to another. That's who we are. And at the end, They saluted and they thanked God. The whole unit, as a unit, saluted and thanked God, and I think that's indicative of the country. So that is that event that moved us from this is the end of the fighting part of the war, and now we're in the beginning of the diplomatic part of the war, which is a whole new balagan.
Okay, so let's stop here for a second because I'm listening to you, David, and those numbers actually were I did not have all the details of the numbers. Rob, to your knowledge, your history buff, and to your knowledge in the history as we know it, in the history of mankind and warfare, has there ever been a country that would go out of their way like this to retrieve what's left of one body of one person like this? I never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, you know what it demonstrates to me is the value of life. And we've been talking about this since the beginning of this. And even if you go back further than that, the embedded into the infrastructure of the Hamas Charter and the Palestinian Manifesto and all the documents and all the stuff they talk about, this is a cult that loves death. I can't put it any other way. When you have the entire population above ground at risk, Hamas strategically and Hezbollah as well is betting that a lot of civilians are going to die, which is great press for them. It's just a very strange world that they live in, and we don't value that. That David's perspective here is really valuable, and I hope people caught both the obvious and the subtle comments that he made. Number one, they sent in more than 2,000 men and women, I would imagine, that would be important to not only to recover the body, but they're sending a statement saying we value the people that are in our lives. And
But
this
it's
man
yeah.
was a yeah. And the second thing is, if you know a little bit of Hebrew, I don't know enough Hebrew to save my life, but the song that they broke into when the body was discovered and they put Ron Gavili's body into the coffin for transport, they broke into a song called Anima Amin, which is, I believe, with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah. It's one of, if I remember correctly, one of Maimonides'
Yeah.
13
13
state,
principles of faith,
13
yes.
principles, right? But that they would choose that song at that moment after all of the suffering and the pain and all of that, which is really not a local war at all, but it's really hit all continents. This is really a worldwide impact. That song would be sung to me is very interesting.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח. I believe completely in the coming of the Messiah. I hope, I pray, and I've got goosebumps just saying this, that that will happen as quickly as possible.
So
So
go ahead.
that moves us to the second stage of the whole peace, the whole how do you say arrangement that President Trump is trying to push into the Middle East. And I'm going to say it now, that for us was a critical point. We were willing, nothing was going to move forward until that happens. That has now happened. And what's happening in Gaza right now is there's this attempt to move to the second stage, which is, okay, let's start reorganizing, rebuilding, reconcentrating what needs to be in Gaza. The thing is this, one of the how do you say the parameters or one of the conditions that President Trump put on rebuilding and reinstating Gaza was the disarmament of the Hamas, and they're not willing to do that.
So
So,
where do we go from here?
I'm shocked.
so that is the stage we are right now. We finished stage one, but we can't go into stage two until the Hamas disarms. We can't go into stage two until the Hamas agrees not to try to kill Israelis, not to try to kill Jews. And I'm not surprised that this, in a nutshell, is also part of the problem we have with Iran. We can't go forward with Iran until Iran decides not to try to kill Jews. I mean, what's holding back the Iranian agreement? Their ability, their capability, and their technology that they're putting together in order to kill Jews. And as long as they're not willing to do that, we're going to have to take away that capability from them. Now, the thing is this, and here's maybe something that a lot of people don't understand because I'm hearing this discussion. The United States of America has to take away that capability because they don't only want to kill Jews, they want to kill anybody that is not Muslim. And right now they're yelling at the little Satan, but the United States of America has to take away that capability, because if there's anything we're understanding about this new world order that Trump is putting together, he says if you are going to be a threat to the United States of America, by bringing drugs across our border, by sending illegal aliens, by threatening not to support your side of an agreement. If you're going to be a threat, I'm coming after you. That's what Trump is saying. Trump has actually turned into the sheriff. He says, if you are a threat to America, to the way America first, if you're a threat to that, I'm coming after you. So America has to deal with Iran as much as Israel has to.
So we are right now at the time of this recording. Rob and I were talking about that this morning, and I want him to kind of before the show, and I want him to kind of revisit it for a second. Rob said, Olivier, they're bringing the U.S. is bringing a second aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz. The Abraham Lincoln is there, and now they're bringing the Nimitz, and I told Rob, I said, "Well, is that considered a lot?" And what was your response? You don't bring that much. What would you say?
You don't bring that amount of firepower and forward deploy it. The little bit I know, and I don't know much. David is certainly the military expert here, but you don't move that much men and material thousands of miles away from their base without the express consideration that it's going to get used.
Oh, no.
They've got,
I mean,
I was reading reports last week. There are at least at one report was 47 C-17s that were carrying material back and forth. I worked on that program in Long Beach for McDonnell Douglas, then Boeing later. The C-17 is a massive aircraft that carries. It can carry tanks, helicopters, men, material. It's massive. When you've got 47 stated, and who knows how much more, you've got tankers. You've got 3 different kinds of tankers that are flying in and out of there. You've got the KC-46, which is the new one, off the 767 platform. You've got the Strato Cruiser, I think it's called, or the Strato tanker, the KC-135, which, by the way, is 70 years old. Some of those airplanes were built 70 years ago, and they're still flying well. And you've got the KC-10s, which is another tanker platform. You've got all of that going on, plus squadrons of F-35s and F-18s and F-15s and all of that. That's an enormous amount of firepower, not to mention all of the other things on the ground, missile systems and who knows what else has been installed in Jordan and who knows where else. Israel, of course, has got their own firepower. So the United States is sending a message to Iran that this time it's not going to be one little local, a couple of bombs drop down a shaft to blow up your nuclear program. The United States at this point means business. And the secondary punch, which is very powerful, is going to be, nobody knows what Israel is going to do at this point. So I'm thinking that the entire balance of power at this point, again, David, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the balance of power is what at stake here, is how much of this is going to change governments and bring down, I mean, we know the revolution right now, or the civil, whatever you want to call it, in Iran, one of the most dangerous things for a foreign power to do is to intervene in a foreign civil war.
Yeah.
I know the United States, America's Civil War, fought in the 1860s. The Confederacy, which was breaking away from the federal government, was trying to woo both Britain and France into the fight, and neither one of them fully committed to that. They recognized what was going on, and so they stayed out of it. The United States gets involved in that, it's gonna get very interesting very fast.
So what we think is the reason that the strike hasn't come is because they don't want to do another Saddam Hussein or another Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, where you take apart the country and there's nothing that steps in and kind of reorganizing.
You've got a
So
vacuum there, yep.
we know that the Mossad is working on the ground. We know that the Kurds are working. We know that there's things happening in Azerbaijan. But I think the main issue is what's happening the day after, which is why, and maybe this connects to something that you said, there's a whole reorganization of the power dynamics inside the Middle East today. Iran is being taken off the table. So what fills in that role? And we're seeing the creation of two axes. And I know I'm plugging my own channel unshamedly, but if you come to the Balagan Connection somewhere tonight, probably about 3 or 4 in the morning, I'm going to be uploading a video about the new axes, the new dynamics in the geopolitics of the Middle East. But basically, you're seeing an axis that basically is saying Iran's off the table, but Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and what's left of Iran, together with Pakistan, are becoming one side. And Israel, UAE, Greece, and India are becoming another counterbalance. And the United States of America very shrewdly is playing the sides against themselves.
Don't forget, you didn't mention Turkey/Syria.
Yeah, sorry. So Turkey's going to be on the side with Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia,
Yeah.
Pakistan, and
Yeah,
Iran.
yeah.
Sorry,
I just want to make
that's
sure
correct.
you don't forget to, because they're there
So,
too.
so,
There's
so we're
there's
seeing this
dynamics.
polarization. We're seeing
Yeah,
this polarization.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think what's holding the United States strike back right now is Saudi Arabia is being very, very loud about we don't want you to strike Iran because the fallout will happen to us. Now, nobody cares when the fallout happens to Israel. I mean, we got hit by rockets in first war, second war, this war, but now the United States is being careful about the fallout on Saudi Arabia. So we're going to have to see how President Trump kind of wiggles in this one. But we do believe, if how do you say, past experience is any indication, that him and Benjamin Netanyahu are working closely together to kind of mess this around. The commander of CENTCOM was in Israel 2 days ago, and we believe that's part of what's happening.
I want to add one thing to that. It is very interesting to watch the transmission of information release and who says it. For example, last week, something came out about the Turks being on the ground. The Israelis say, we are openly opposed to this and we disagree with the United States. And it's interesting because you wonder how much of this is misinformation, true information, how much of this is spycraft. You don't really know. And so I'm paying attention to what is being said, what is not being said, and who says it, and then also who doesn't say it, who doesn't say anything.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
and
Olivier.
another aspect of this whole thing that really is upsetting to me is the lack of engagement from anybody when it comes to the numbers of victims in Iran. The people have been killed, wounded, put in hospital, put in prison, and I mean it's in the tens of thousands, and that's what we know. Okay. And nobody. I just saw a post on X this morning with this actor. I forgot his name. He's from South Africa, I think, or Australia, one of those, and very pro-Israel. And he was really asking where is Hollywood, and he was naming some names like Mark Ruffalo and where are they when people are being killed in the tens of thousands in Iran. Like we've heard before, no Jews, no news, and it's really upsetting that nobody would care. We know what's going on, but it's not making the news.
So basically, everybody else is allowed to kill whoever they want, starve whoever they want, and I can mention Sudan and Nigeria and all of those. Okay, Yemen, for instance, has been going on like crazy. That's all acceptable. When the Jews are mixed in, it's not acceptable. And it's like we have this built-in anti-Jewish organ in our brain that gets triggered every time something is connected to the Jews. And I've been trying to figure out why. Why does somebody who hears about terrible things happening in South Africa or terrible things happening here, and it doesn't trigger them, but when they hear that an Israeli officer, I still remember this, an Israeli officer slapped a Palestinian teenager because he threw rocks at him, it was front page news. Why do we have this organ that triggers this reaction against the Jews? And this is just another example.
Well, it's what it is. It's they will not talk about other events in the world unless unless of course you can blame the Jews, like crazies like Candace Owens will talk about. Venezuela was an operation from the Mossad, and whatever. I mean, she comes up with all those things. So if you can figure out a way to get the Jews involved, then they become the responsible party for all the ills of the world. And in all fairness, David, I don't think all people have that mechanism where they blame the Jews automatically. Thank God there are some, people of goodwill and Christians who are still supporting Israel and favor the truth over lies and facts over fabrication. But it is true that we have this. A lot of people are buying the lies and just blaming the Jews. It's so easy that it happens so quickly to blame the Jews. So that's it's frustrating to me how. How the Jews are quickly blamed and nobody's checking the facts. Talking about facts, and I don't know. I wanted your opinion on that because it was Rob who brought that to my attention last week. Like I had nothing better to do. He gave me more work to do. Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
But he brought to my attention through a common friend of ours that Encyclopedia Britannica was retooling, and I'm being kind, their data on a lot of topics. They have one section of the Encyclopedia Britannica online called Britannica Kids, and it's for little kids or young kids, and there's like 2 or 3 different subsections within that, but it's all for young kids. So it's tailored in a way that it doesn't use big words, and that's all good. I mean, I'm all in favor of that. Now, Britannica, I don't know if you knew that, you guys, but Britannica started officially in 1768. That's
Oh,
So we look back at a long time. That's 8 years before the Declaration of Independence, to give it some perspective. Okay, 1768, and it has been for decades. We can even say centuries. It has been the anchor for the truth. When you want to get some information about something that happened, you go to the Encyclopedia Britannica, and that's why there were the volumes that people would own. They were so expensive, and then it went online, and of course in the days of Wikipedia, Encyclopedia Britannica is definitely a better option. And then I get into this article that Rob sends me, and I had to get a subscription to it. I had to pay for it, and I just canceled it today. So I just did it for a week. But I did the first week for free, and I pulled all the articles, and I wrote a blog, and it's titled Encyclopedia Britannica or Encyclopedia Propaganda. And in that article, I showed all the different things that were being said about Israel and Palestine, and one a statement that was made that to ancient Jews, Palestine is very important because this is where settled the kingdom of Judah. This is what it says. The kingdom of Judah was settled in Palestine. I mean, look at, and there's a map of the Middle East. And by the way, Rob, I don't know if you knew that, Encyclopedia Britannica got so much pushback that they pulled that map today.
Fantastic.
oh, interesting.
So
there's
it is
excellent.
good to write about it, to point the finger, because they got so much pushback from some of lawyers and for the truth that they say, okay, we'll pull the map. It was a map that says Europe, Asia, Africa, just those words, and a big yellow in the middle. And I'll be showing the map on the screen when we do the post editing. And in the middle, there was a little word towards the coast, where Israel is, and all it said was in black over red, Palestine. That's all. And nothing else on the map. Palestine and Europe, Asia, Africa. Just a simplified map with Palestine in the middle. Another map that said Palestine on the rest of the map, which is Jerusalem and this and that, and it said Palestine, and the map was dated to be 1400 BC at the time of some pharaoh of Egypt. And that's the legend on the map. And you're thinking like Palestine back then, it's never Palestine, but we know that it was called that. Emperor Adrian, 135 BC, AD, sorry, 135 AD, when he changed the name to humiliate the Jews. We know all that, but back then, even if you accept that name, it didn't exist. So
Even the
we
Philistines didn't exist at 14 BC, 1400 BC. So I want to expand on this because this is the first time I've heard about Britannica, but I want to kind of connect it to something that I've been hearing lately, and this is, I think, much more ominous than most of us really understand. And it's connected to Wikipedia, and it's connected to the way the algorithms and the AIs collect information that is becoming usable. And it turns out that one of the main sources of information for ChatGPT, for instance, you go on and ask in ChatGPT, where is Mount Ararat? One of the main sources of information for ChatGPT is the Britannica and Wikipedia. And if you change the source material in the Britannica, you're now changing the source material for the AI that is teaching the world about everything.
Of course.
And I think this is much of a deeper, I think, and again, I can't help, I'm not very good at conspiracy theories, but I can't help but think that somebody has realized that if you hit this subject at the root of information, meaning these sources, it is going to proper, because a generation from now, nobody's going to believe that there wasn't a Palestine in 1400 BC. And I think that's the problem. So the enemy is there, and it is a battle that we are going to lose by definition because, and I've had a conversation with our friend James on this one, by definition, AI is a democracy, meaning AI sees positive the will and the thoughts and the feelings of the majority. And if the majority is anti-Israel, AI will put the emphasis on sources of material that are anti-Israel and bring that up. And what you get is the snowball effect or the viral effect that we're talking about. And I think this is going to be something that we're going to be dealing with for generations to come. It's a modern version of what happened in Spain and what happened in Germany. I mean, we're doing it again.
And I think you're right. I think and you said something that's terrifying to me. You said this is a battle that we're not going to win, and I hope you're wrong, but I don't think you are. And so it's on us to teach our children, and well, for the three of us, it's mostly we're looking at grandchildren now. I know you don't have any grandchildren, Rob, but maybe you'll have.
We'll work on it.
We'll work on that. But that is why I have started in the last year when that's why I collect books. By the way, I collect books, real books, and
Very important.
And I collect books that were printed before AI was introduced. And when I say I collect, I don't collect anything I can find, but on the topics that are important to me, which of course includes the Bible and theology, I collect books that are older editions because they are reliable. And I tell people, make sure you have at least one printed Bible in your household, at least one, more than one, but because soon, the word of God is going to become the word of the gods, small g.
Mm. And okay, I'm going to use a term that we use in the military. There's different kinds of combat. There's an attack combat. There's a defensive combat. There's attrition. And one of the types of combat that I was taught as a commander is what we call in Hebrew nesiga v'ashaya, which would be translated into retreat and delay, meaning a classic example would be the Battle of Burma in World War II, where the Japanese were coming from the north, and the Allies fought a battle for them not to get to Australia, and they were losing the battle, but they made the Japanese spend as much time and energy and resources on every hill that they conquered on the way. We're fighting that kind of battle where the enemy is going to win in the end, but we cannot just turn around and leave the battlefield. We have to make the enemy pay as much as possible for every hill and every valley and every position that it takes. And the idea is to do that without losing your capability, meaning make the enemy work hard, but don't allow him to finish off your forces. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly from a military point of view. And that's what we need to do. And that is connected to what we're seeing. And again, all three of us are doing this, each one in our little kind of fiefdom. But yes, and to create, I'm going to say the elite or the special forces or the generation that is different or I'm using Nazarenes or people that are not of the majority that are willing to stand up and be different from the majority. And we have to train our children. One of the things I say in churches is that I grew up as a Christian in a Jewish environment and was persecuted for my Christianity. I mean, beat up in school. We have to teach our children that they are going to be a persecuted minority in the United States if they consider themselves followers of Yeshua. And we have to prepare them for that.
Rob?
How much time do we have? David, in answer to your comment about the enemy will win in the end, well, for a brief period of time, the enemy will appear to have won. However, we know what the end game in all this thing is. The end game is
Yes.
going to be back to Zechariah 12, and it's interesting. We can talk for days about politics and economics and social issues and throw all of that in together. Wherever you are, Middle East, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, United States, South America, whatever it is. But what's going to happen is, and it's just interesting, is wherever you turn, the Jews are in the middle of it. Good, bad, or indifferent, they're in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, back to some of the earlier conversations we had, dealing with the issue of anti-Semitism, as you called it, soft anti-Semitism. And that's a future thing we're going to be exploring for one of your programs, David. We know it's coming. When the war broke out in October of 2023, I remember I contacted a friend of ours and said to him, this feels like 1938 or whatever. He says, it's worse because now the anti-Semitism is global. It was just not in Europe. And so we have
Yeah.
it all over the United States, the college campuses, on the streets, in the cities, and all these things are connected. What you may see happening with ICE in the street, you'll also see signs talking about Jewish colonizers, and you'll talk about Israel and all of that. And then you see it all across the globe, wherever people are gathered, there's going to be some kind of an attack on Israel and the Jewish people. And it's amazing to me that we see what's going on and we know where the end game is going to be Zechariah 12, where every nation on the planet, including, sadly, those countries that might even be considered friends now, will come against Israel. But we also know, too, that God's got the real end game in mind. And the real end game is going to be the return of the Messiah. And so really our work, and speaks back to Olivier's mission and his personal life, all the work he's done for different ministries he's been part of, is to make sure you're always prepared to share the gospel. Because at the bottom of all of this is a Jewish Messiah who's going to return to a Jewish people in a Jewish land and establish a Jewish kingdom. And while we get all involved in the politics and all the other things that are around it, sometimes it's hard to differentiate and separate these things. But at the end game is going to be about Yeshua.
Well, yes, I agree with you, and then thank you for making that clear. And I've been in ministry for 35 years, Jewish ministry of some sort, and it used to be a lot easier to do some of what we're talking about, especially when it came to teaming up with the church. And now when we see people, uh, uh, bad influencers like Tucker Carlson, Megan Kelly, Steve Bannon, Candace Owens, and like the latest. I got to read this to you guys because it's gonna lead me to talk about another topic in a minute. But I mean, I want to listen to this. This is from Candace Owens. This is yesterday. Okay, so it's like it's we're talking about. I mean,
It's fresh.
this is gonna post in early February, but this is like early. This is first week of February, very fresh. Yes, we are ruled by satanic pedophiles who work for Israel. Everyone needs to digest that fact now. Pray and prepare yourselves to continue this fight against who are working to protect them in government, media, and church. This is the synagogue of Satan we are up against. This is from February 1st, 2026. She has millions of followers. I don't know why people are still following her unless it's upsetting to me. There are even people within the evangelical church who are now starting to distance themselves from supporting Israel, and who are buying those lies. As a matter of fact, David, I think you had an encounter recently with something that happened to you where that was kind of concerning to you. Do you want to share that?
Yes, and what I've been trying to figure out the whole time is what's the core issue? I mean, where is this coming from? Because think about this. There's one thing that unifies or brings together the Muslim crazies, the secular progressive idiots, and now even born again Christians who are using the name of Jesus to attack the Jews. I mean, why? Where does it come from? And what's the core of this? And I was at a church a little while ago, friends of ours, somebody who's been with me to Israel a couple of times. The pastor, or my friend, wasn't speaking. They had a associate pastor speaking, and he brought a sermon about on the subject of Matthew 23, and this is Jesus talking about the Pharisees. And again, the sermon was biblical. It was exact. It brought out biblical references from different places, none from the Old Testament, by the way. And I'm sitting there, thinking that he's doing a really good job. And then, there's the whole passage about the phylacteries. He pulls out a phylacteries from a bag, an old phylacteries that he had found somewhere, and we all know how the Jews take that seriously. So they were not kosher anymore. The leather was worn, and the phylacteries were not,
We're
tied
talking about the
together.
little black box that Jewish
The
people
little
put on their
black box
forehead
that,
for
yeah,
prayer
to
every
fill in.
morning. Yeah, so people know.
which is a biblical commandment. Basically, put your word on on your heart and on your head, and the Jews take that seriously. And he kind of ridiculed the fact that they're putting these boxes on their heads. And I'm saying to myself, the guy is not anti-Israel. He's not anti-Semitic. But anybody who came out of that sermon, and what was weird to me, if the people who have been listening to this kind of sermon year after year, that the Pharisees were full of pride and they did this and they did this, when he comes to Israel, even if he's going to come to Israel, he's going to see the Jews at the Western Wall with the tefillin on their head, and he's going to see it in a negative issue, in a negative way. And when you tell him that the Jews are full of pride, which is what Candace is saying, or you tell them that the Jews don't care about anything but themselves, which is what Tucker is saying, and you tell them that the Jews want to conquer the world, which is what the Muslims are saying, if you grow up on that kind of diet of the Jews are the Jews are the problem, sermon after sermon after sermon that is being taught biblically, it's going to be very easy to convince a young person who grew up in this kind of church that the Jews are the problem.
Uh,
And I'm saying to myself, it's scary because these are not anti-Semitic people. They're Bible-loving people, but they have what I call a vitamin J deficiency. And yes, because even a lack of a vitamin, even if it's not a poison, a lack of a vitamin over a long period of time can create a weakness in your bones or create a weakness in the way you deal with things. And if the Jews have a role to play, if you're not integrating the positive vitamin J into your teaching, into your biblical study, then you're going to have a vitamin J deficiency. So when somebody says the Jews are the problem, there's going to be a whole row of young people standing up and saying, well, it makes sense. Listen, I've heard this all my life in the church.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that nobody is talking about and nobody is addressing. It freaked me out.
I want to add one thing to David's point. There's an old friend of ours, Arnold Fruchtenbaum, who's one of the primary or premier messianic scholars on the planet, and he wrote a book called Israelology, and he says it's the missing link for systematic theology. That if once you understand or you have an Israelology within your framework, then all of this is going to make a lot more sense. And David, you're 100% right, is that you have Bible loving people, we'll call them good Christians, right? But if you're not taught or trained on the basics of how the Jews fit into this whole model, I mean, Paul spent 3 chapters in the
Mm.
book of Romans trying to set the framework correctly within Christian circles. Is that if you don't understand Romans 9, 10, and 11, you can't really understand the position of the future. And that's why I think Paul wrote those chapters, knowing at some point in time somebody was going to come on the attack. And those chapters are sitting there. One, close to a fourth of the book of Romans, addresses the issue of the Jews. And he says that God does not abandon them. And God forbid that should happen. So 100% right on the money on that one.
Yeah, I think the problem, David, where you explain this soft anti-Semitism, and I agree with you. I agree with you. This is the kind of soft anti-Semitism that left unchecked, hardens
Yeah.
and becomes the springboard for tougher anti-Semitism, and who knows where it's going to end. Looking at the way things are going right now, but it's really not that difficult to fix if people are paying attention. I'm taking the example of, and I love the man. He's really an encouragement and an example. The pastor of the church that Ellen and I attend in Texas. He'll take a passage like this, and instead of saying the Pharisees, and we know in the context they were Pharisees, but it's okay, and I'll get to that in a second. But instead of saying the Pharisees, he will just say some within the Jewish leadership. It's saying the same thing, but it's not using a word that has a negative connotation. The Pharisees, those mean Jews are all about themselves, and so some within the Jewish leadership. I will say that too when I teach about it. Some within the Jewish leadership did this, some did not. And when you use the word Pharisee, it's and you say and then you paint a negative picture of all the Jews, as a result. It's not much different than saying that all Germans are Nazis. And you got to be very careful. And the Pharisees, those who are guilty of what they were guilty of in passages like Matthew 23 and other passages, were they guilty of, yes, pride and greed and power and control? Absolutely. Those are all sins that, by the way, are not exclusive to Jews. And that's the point, my friends. They're not exclusive to Jews. You don't have to be a Jew to be greedy, prideful, selfish. No, all you have to do is be alive. Be a human being. If you're a human being, why is it that when the Gentiles in the Bible are prideful, greedy, power hungry, why is it that there's nobody in the world today going like, those Gentiles, those Gentiles? Going back to what David was saying, there's something in the human spirit, in the human in our brains that is wired to immediately go after the Jews. So this thing with the Pharisees here, and by the way, I want to recommend this book, and I don't even know if it's in print anymore. It's from 1977,
Wow.
which, by the way, was 50 years ago, guys. Can you believe it? By William Coleman. Those Pharisees, who were they? What were their belief? Why did they oppose Jesus? Are they still with us? Those Pharisees. A really good treatment of who they were. But the bottom line is this: the Pharisees were Jews. They were Jews by birth, ethnically, but they were sinners in need of a savior, in need of a redeemer, in need of a Mashiach first, and Jews second. So anybody holding their ethnic identity as being responsible for their actions is doing it wrong. The ethnic identity has nothing to do, and that's the problem with a lot of anti-Semitism today. That's the synagogue of Satan that Candace Owens is teaching about, completely out of context, by the way. It's
There
there
we go.
it's there in Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9. It's there, and I believe it was a real group of people that I think were just Jew wannabes who were trying to get in the way of the Jewish believers back then. And there's several views, but no matter what the view is, it's basically it's taken out of context, and it's a blanket statement about all Jews of all times. And so now you got the Pharisees and their greed and their stupid little boxes on their heads, quote unquote, is it's just like it's applied to all Jews of all times. But again, we are all sinners in need of a redeemer, and being a sinner is not exclusive to Jews. Okay, we don't hold, we don't control. That's one thing we don't control. Okay, if you want to be make a joke about Jews control everything. Being a sinner is open to anybody by virtue of being born, and you need to be forgiven for your sins by following Yeshua and believing that he is the Messiah of Israel and the Savior of the world. So when I hear what you say, David, I agree with you. It's concerning because it's painting the wrong picture out of context, but it can easily be fixed by teaching scripture in context and by not using words that are loaded with negativity.
One of the frames that I like to use when we kind of go into this, my personal kind of background is I was raised the son of a pastor. And many times my father would use, and we all do this when we teach and when we preach, we use our own personal experiences to illustrate what we're teaching about. And in the case of my dad, and I know many other pastors, they use their own family to illustrate some of the subjects and some of the issues that they're dealing with. And I never forget the day that I was sitting in the congregation and my dad started a sermon with, "Yesterday, David lied to me." And and the whole congregation turns around and looks at me like I'm an evil person. And he used that to segue into a sermon about truth and about lying. And he used me as an illustration, but I walk out of there thinking everybody thinks I'm a liar. And I think to a certain extent, that's what God is doing with his people. He is using his people, God's kids, his closer, the people that he has a special relationship, to illustrate to the rest of the world these subjects that need illustration. And instead of going outside and wide and non-connected, he uses personal experiences that he sees around him. Because don't forget, who's he talking? Who's Jesus talking to? He's talking to people who sit in synagogues and see the Pharisees. So it makes sense to use those kind of illustrations.
Of course.
But the price that we pay is that we are the bad illustration for a lot of things that Jesus was teaching. And I think, and what's freaked me out, and maybe this is a platform to say it, and Olivier, you are much more, how do you say, versed in this than I am. We need to extend this understanding because, I mean, even my wife, hear what I'm doing. What am I doing? I'm using my own family as an example. I mean, she didn't pick up on it during the sermon. I'm sitting there going like this, like this, like this. And only when I explained to her what happened, all of a sudden, it goes up. I think most of the Christians, most of the people who even love Jews, most of the pastors
Gentiles.
don't really understand, exactly, don't really get it
Yeah.
don't really understand it.
It's
And it's our job.
it's a desensitization. That's what it is. There's desensitize. It is our job to do it, but to do it in love. It happened to me
There we
years
go.
ago in a church that I used to attend in Washington State, and the pastor was a lover of Israel. He'd been taking groups to Israel. He was not anti-Semitic, not one iota. And he's walking across the stage on a Wednesday night, and I'm sitting right next to the evangelism pastor, who was a good friend of mine. And I had just finished telling them, like a week before, a few days before, I said we have to be very careful that if Jewish people, because there was a big church, it was a mega church in Washington State, and Jewish community was aware of us, and so if you do things right, you can rebuild some bridges. So the head pastor is teaching Wednesday night, and he's walking across the stage, and he's going, now let me paint the picture here. The Jews were just finished crucifying Christ, and as they were doing that, and I'm going, oy oy oy, and then I elbow my pastor friend who's on staff, and he looks at me and he goes, what?
What's your problem?
And he goes, what? And I go, did you hear what pastor just said? He goes, yeah, what? And he was listening. And I told him, privately later, I said, you have to understand, if a Jewish person walked into the church that moment or was sitting during that sermon because they were visiting, they would be terrified. They would be like, see, I knew it. All
They would
Christians
turn around
are
and walk
anti-Semite.
out.
And they would
They would
walk
turn-
out and they would tell the community, and that church is, okay, anti-Semitic, they hate us. And so, but that guy, it totally went over his head. He did not see it. He was, and this is not pointing the finger, you guys. This is a reality. As a Gentile Christian, he was desensitized to what we see as Jews.
That's why I call it soft anti-Semitism. It's not in your face. It's not somebody who decided. It's not this. But again, if you grow up in some of these evangelical churches that don't stress this, and year after year, sermon after sermon, Sunday school after Sunday school, you hear the Jews are the problem. They did it. They didn't. And then somebody like Nick Fuentes says the Jews are running the world. It makes sense.
People start connecting the dots. Let me add something. A closer reading of the book of Acts, which I think is critical here. Jewish writers, except for Luke, but he was very closely aligned with the Jewish people, and there's debate whether or not he was Jewish or not, but it doesn't matter.
Well, he was Jewish by profession. He was a doctor.
But there you go. Right? Paul is a professing Pharisee, a member of the tribe of Benjamin. And it says in Acts that many of the chief priests and the Pharisees believed. There was a sizable Jewish believing contingent tied to the religious authorities. So for anybody to conclude that the Jews didn't believe is a wrong conclusion. And the second piece of that is that this was an interfamilial, an interfamily dispute. You had the Jewish believers debating with the religious authorities, but they were all Jews. And it's one thing to have outsiders affected by all of this. It's something else entirely to put it in the context of a family discussion. We all have family members we don't agree with, but at the end of the day, we're still family.
Of course.
Blood is thicker than water. And one of the things that Olivier has been excellent at teaching over the years has been to put all of this in the proper context. I know, David, it's where your heart is as well, is when you're lecturing to a group of 100 or 1,000 non-Jewish believers, if you can put it into the proper context and say, understand, this is a family argument. And there is no anti-Semitism here, but you've got to teach it correctly. You can't point the finger at Jews and say, this is what the Jews did or what they say or whatever. No, it is what people within the body of Messiah and the greater Jewish community outside of that, they're just debating the points.
It's intramural.
It's intramural. Not
Yeah.
everybody's going to agree. It's the way things are.
Yeah.
But to take it, like David is saying, and suddenly you frame it that all Jews are responsible for it, after the Jews finished killing Christ. Well, it was a small group within the leadership that certainly was responsible for that. But just as true on the other side of that is tens of thousands, and we see the record in the book of Acts. Thousands were coming to the Messiah daily. So you had this incredible groundswell of support for Yeshua, for Jesus, that is just as important, but it never seems to get reported in the same framework
Well,
as the opposite side.
A very good point. If somebody says to me today, after all Jews, were finished killing Christ, I would say, well, does that include Joseph or Arimathea and Nicodemus?
Yeah.
Well, no, but they were not really Jews. What? I
Yeah.
mean,
How
they were
about
Jews.
Paul?
They were
How about
Jews.
Does that
Paul?
include Matthew, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you say, all Jews? Well, what I mean by all Jews is, but be careful, because when you say all Jews,
Exactly.
you're giving fuel to those who would want nothing more than to
Right.
just paint all the Jews as demon-possessed pedophiles up to today. So that's why you have to be very careful the words you're using.
And again, I find it fascinating that this hatred is now seeping into the evangelical church.
Yep.
Yes.
It's being brought up. Tucker is saying this is Israel is doing terrible things, and it's very unchristian of them. That's what they're saying, and I'm saying, wait a minute. I mean, I've been there, but what again is fascinating to me is the fact that this is the common denominator for everything that's going on. The progressive wacko left, the deep MAGA right,
Yep.
and the let's rule the world Muslims all have one thing in common,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
that
Yep.
is the hatred of the Jews.
And
Yeah.
that comes
David, to
from
your point,
Satan. It is a spiritual battle. We have to be. I say this on almost every program I
absolutely.
record, but
Yep.
we have to be reminded
Yep.
it comes from Satan. It is a spiritual battle. You wanted to show a book cover
Yeah, I
that you've
wanted to
showed.
add one point, David. To your point here, this book, I'm reading it now. It's right to your point. These are Israelis actually that wrote the book and did a lot of research within the church and talking about this whole concept of Christian Zionism.
Mhm.
And but they're facts and data people. They've
Yeah.
run survey after survey, and they're coming up with the facts and data in chart form so that you can see what the trends and the patterns are for what's going on within the church. And so this is a battleground right now, and the enemy is going to do everything it can to undermine the church's support of Israel wherever it finds it.
Yeah. Well,
So
we do our part in fighting that, and
you bet.
we have to wrap it up, you guys. Otherwise, I'm going to end up being longer than James Cadiz on my podcast, and God forbid.
That's me tomorrow.
I love James. It was so good to see him the other day.
Yeah.
Mr. Balagan here, where can people find you?
The Balagan Connection. Balagan, right there. Balagan Connection on YouTube and Insta and everything. I just want to put one thing there. I'm going to call it vitamin J pills. Our job is to create vitamin J pills. So anybody who wants a vitamin J pill, contact me, contact Rob, contact Olivier. We are the ones who will bring the vitamin J to where it needs to be brought. And I think that is, I think to a certain extent, what God is calling us all to do.
I'm trying to resist stealing the vitamin J deficiency for a book title I'm going to write. I'm trying to
There you-
resist that.
No, don't resist. You can use it.
Okay, you heard it online. He gave me the
You heard
okay
it.
to
You
use
can,
it.
you can use it.
Rob, where can people find you?
Info at Ben David, all one word, Ben David, BenDavid MJC, standing for Messianic Jewish Congregation.org.
Info at
Ben David,
bendavidmjc.org.
MJC.org.
Guys, I have no idea how many opinions we provided our viewers with. It was more than 3, I know that. But it's always a blessing to have you. I'm looking forward to the next time. Until that time, you stay healthy, you stay strong in the Word. And for you watching, thanks, shalom, and be blessed.